So I guess this one's kind of for both of us because you would have had the same experiences and situations, but how do you maintain relationships while training and chasing your goals?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think it's a tough one, especially, I think you really have to communicate what's important and why it's important, but ultimately you can't control the other person getting on board with that. And I think that was the challenge for me, is that it was really important to me. I know obviously we're going back a little while now when I was competing, but it was something that was really important to me. And although you can communicate that and you can communicate what that means your priorities are and what that means about changing the things that you have and the things that you do, ultimately you can't control somebody else getting on board with that. And I think especially with, talking about your environment, and for me at that time competing, it's a big commitment. It's a big commitment for the athlete in terms of how you live, how you eat, how you train, how you sleep. All of those things is a massive commitment. And for the athlete themselves, that's a challenge to kind of keep that dedication, the commitment, being consistent with it. That's what makes a good athlete. If you are consistent and dedicated and disciplined, they are all of the things that elevate the athlete from the amateur and hobbyist to being a professional. And whilst I didn't compete professionally, you still, if you want to compete at a certain level, you have to do exactly the same things that professional athletes do. But you've also got to hold down a full-time job and parenting responsibilities at the same time. Or certainly I did, and others will too. But I think the challenge for me was that I was doing all of those things, and yet it wasn't as a professional athlete. So I think for other people, it was quite hard for them to get their head around, like, why would you do all of that? Why would you train so hard and eat differently and kind of make all of that commitment ultimately for something that is a hobby? So I think that's probably where it's different for both of us, because it is now your job, but it's also only recently become your job, and you've been living this lifestyle for a long time. So I think for me, it was just an acceptance at some, I got to the point where it was, okay, this is important to me. This is the commitment that I need to make to get what I want, to have what I want, to achieve what I want. But ultimately, I can't control somebody else getting on board with that. I can only communicate why it's important and ask them for their support, and tell them what I need from them to support me with that. If they're not on board with that, I then have to decide what's more important. Is the goal and is that more important? Are the things that I want to achieve in life, is that more important, or is this individual more important? And that's the challenge.
Yeah.
You can ask, you can communicate, but you can't force somebody to do that. And even if you do, if you put that pressure on, ultimately the resentment will come up at some point. Either they will resent you because
Yeah.
they feel backed into the corner, or you resent them because you know that it's not an authentic support, and they're doing it because they feel they have to. So the resentment shows up eventually. So
Yeah. The
yeah,
truth comes out.
it
Yeah.
does. Yeah, you can't hold that stuff down for long. So like eventually it's gonna come through one way or another, and it
Yeah.
never ends well. So sometimes just like that really honest conversation. Sometimes that's a difficult conversation to say, like, I get it, I hear you, I know that's important to you, but that's not the lifestyle I want. I can't show up in the same way. That's just, unfortunately, that's sometimes how it goes. But that's also why some people push through to that professional route and other people choose other things to be a priority. And there's no right or wrong, it's just what is important to you. And in that hierarchy of things that are important, what is more important for that time? You can make a different decision at a later date, but ultimately, like, if that drive and that passion is there and it's that important to you, then you then have to decide where everything else fits in.